The galaxy already feared humans. Not because of their numbers, humanity was a young species, scattered across a handful of star systems at the far edge of the Orion Arm. Not because of their technology, their fleets were powerful but nowhere near the raw industrial might of the oldest empires. No, the galaxy feared humans because they had done what no other species had ever dared. They had fought every war to the last breath, even when defeat was certain, and they had won. The very name of Earth was spoken like a warning. It was the memory of burnt fleets, toppled tyrannies, and alliances reshaped by the sheer will of one species that refused to bow. But even with all that fear, even with all the whispered legends of what humans could do when cornered, no one in the galaxy had seen what was coming next. The Draken Dominion had chosen to test them. Admiral Kether stood on the bridge of his flagship, a monstrous warship of living metal and pulsing crimson light, watching as the Dominion fleet dropped out of FTL one after another. Hundreds of warships formed a wall of death in orbit over the colony world of Halora 3, a human world that had been fortified like a citadel. The humans will not surrender this time either, his strategist hissed. They never do, Kether growled. His tendrils coiled with irritation. But they will break. No species can resist the weight of the Dominion forever. Our firepower eclipses their defenses 100 to 1. It will be over in hours. Hours. That was what everyone believed. The Dominion's fleet blotted out the stars. Its commanders expected a brief, bloody siege, followed by silence. What they did not expect was that the humans had been preparing for this moment, not just on Halora 3, but across the entire Terran sphere. In the command bunker beneath Halora 3's surface, General Asha Virek watched the enemy fleet appear on the holotable. Her jaw was set like iron. Around her, officers and tacticians spoke in clipped, tense voices, passing data from orbit to ground batteries and back again. They're in position. Shield grid holding. Orbital guns charged. Civilian shelters locked. Asha's gaze swept over the table, taking in the swarm of hostile signatures. She had known this day would come. For months, whispers of the Dominion's approach had haunted every briefing. But now that it was here, she felt no fear, only focus. "Activate Project Revenant," she said. The room fell silent for half a heartbeat. Then the order rippled outward. Codes were sent. Deep under the mountains of Halora 3, vault doors that had not opened in centuries slid aside, releasing containment locks. They had been waiting. On the bridge of the Dominion flagship, alarms suddenly began to shriek. "Admiral!" Massive energy signatures detected on the planet's surface. Kether's eyes narrowed. "Weapons fire?" "No, sir. Unknown. Power levels are spiking far beyond standard planetary defense systems." The holodisplay flared with light. Massive structures were rising from the ground, armored platforms taller than buildings, bristling with cannons that glowed with pale blue fire. The ground itself seemed to awaken as hidden bunkers deployed missile silos, shield emitters, and atmospheric interceptors. But even this was not what froze the Dominion's bridge crew in silence. Because something else was rising. They were not tanks. They were not mechs. They were not ships. They were warriors. Each one stood nearly 5 meters tall, plated in black armor that seemed to drink the light around it. Their silhouettes were vaguely human but impossibly imposing, broad-shouldered, with thick gauntlets and helms that burned with cold, blue optics. There were hundreds of them, then thousands, then more still as the vaults continued to open. "They are soldiers," Kether said slowly, his voice almost a whisper. "No soldier radiates power like this," the strategist hissed. "Admiral, their energy readings exceed those of our shock troopers by." The warriors began to move, their footfalls making the ground tremble. Massive dropships descended from concealed hangars to lift them skyward, straight toward the enemy fleet. For the first time, Admiral Kether felt something strange coil in his chest. Doubt. In the bunkers below, General HFY stood before a secure transmission feed. The helmet of one of the towering figures turned toward her, and for a brief moment she felt the weight of its gaze even through the thick blast glass. "Revenants deployed," came a deep, metallic voice. "Your orders?" Asha inhaled slowly. This was not like commanding soldiers. The Revenants were not conscripts. They were not even human in the ordinary sense anymore. "Stop the Dominion," she said. "Whatever it takes." The Revenant inclined its head. "So it begins," it said. And then the dropships launched, trailing fire as they rose toward the void. The first clash came in orbit minutes later. Dominion warships opened fire, lancing beams of red energy across space, but the dropships were impossibly fast, weaving through the storm. Then, without warning, the Revenants leapt from their transports, using their own jump packs to propel themselves through the void. They landed on the hulls of Dominion ships like living meteors. The first reports shocked even Kether. Boarding parties detected. Multiple hull breaches. Deck 7 lost contact. And then the screaming began. The galaxy had feared humans before. But now, as the Dominion's fleet began to break under the onslaught of black-armored giants tearing through their ships, the fear deepened into something far more primal. Because this was not just human stubbornness. This was not just human ingenuity. This was what humanity had been hiding all along, warriors bred for the impossible, warriors who did not stop until the last enemy fell. And for the first time in his long career, Admiral Kether felt the certainty of victory slip away like smoke between his claws. The Dominion fleet was supposed to be invincible. It had crushed rebellions across half a spiral arm. It had burned empires from orbit, shattered fortresses with precision strikes, and left entire species in chains. No world had withstood its full force. Until Halora 3. On the surface, civilians huddled in bunkers felt the world shake as orbital fire roared overhead. Yet the human commanders did not waver. They watched as feed after feed came in, dropships reaching enemy hulls, Dominion ships flickering out of formation one by one as they went dark. General HFY stood over the holotable, her hands braced on its edge. "Revenant teams are through the outer perimeter," her operations officer reported. "Admiral Kether's flagship is still coordinating, but Dominion losses are already mounting." Asha nodded once. "Keep them moving. No mercy. Not this time." Her voice carried the weight of centuries, of every war humanity had been forced to fight just to survive. Halora 3 was not merely a battlefield. It was the line that could never be crossed. Above, space became a graveyard. Revenants tore through enemy cruisers, ripping open bulkheads with their powered gauntlets. Dominion Marines, bred for war and conditioned since birth, found themselves overmatched. Every encounter was short and brutal. A Revenant would crash through a corridor, a living juggernaut, shrugging off plasma bolts that would have killed a normal soldier. Their chain blades and energy lances cut through armor, flesh, and fear alike. Ship by ship, the Dominion fleet began to die. Admiral Kether's crew was silent as the casualty reports poured in. "They are not simply boarding," one officer whispered. "They are erasing our ships." Kether's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair. Never before had he seen enemy shock troops perform like this. They moved as if they had trained for this exact scenario, as if every deck, every bulkhead, every Dominion defense pattern had already been mapped in their minds. "These are not soldiers," Kether said finally, voice low. "They are executioners." Far from the battlefield, the galaxy watched in horror. Across the hypernet, news streams lit up with the first grainy images, towering figures in black armor stalking through the wreckage of burning Dominion ships, their glowing eyes visible through smoke. Rumors spread faster than light, entire fleets annihilated in minutes, Dominion veterans begging for reinforcements, warlords recalling their ships from human space before it was too late. The galaxy already feared humanity. Now they began to wonder if perhaps that fear had been too small. On Halora 3, the ground war erupted. The Dominion had landed assault pods before their fleet began to falter, deploying armored walkers and shock infantry. Their plan had been to crush the planet from orbit while storming the cities below. But now, those troops found themselves facing not scattered militia, but revenants leading disciplined human regiments. HFY rode in an armored command carrier, its walls shaking from nearby impacts. Her convoy raced across a blasted plain toward the front lines. Through the viewing slit, she saw the first revenants up close. They moved with eerie coordination, advancing in near silence despite their massive size. One of them paused, scanning the battlefield with its helm sensors, then signaled with a single raised fist. Human artillery shifted fire instantly, hammering the Dominion walkers in a perfect kill pattern. "They're magnificent," one of Asha's aides whispered. "They're necessary," Asha replied grimly. By nightfall, the plain was littered with burning Dominion wrecks. The few surviving enemy soldiers were taken alive, a deliberate choice. Asha stood in the command post as prisoners were dragged in. They stared at the revenants posted at the door, their alien faces pale with terror. "What are they?" one of the prisoners hissed in his native tongue. Asha stepped closer, her voice cold. "They are the reason you should never have come here," she said. The prisoner flinched. Admiral Kether was desperate. "Pull the fleet back," he roared. "Regroup outside the planet's gravity well." But the order came too late. The revenants had already crippled his rear guard. Ships trying to retreat found their engines blown apart by precision missile strikes. And then, just when it seemed the Dominion might escape with at least a fragment of its forces intact, the humans unleashed their next move. From orbit, a massive silhouette emerged from the planet's shadow. It was not a dreadnought. It was not even a ship class the Dominion had ever catalogued. The vessel was colossal, a mobile fortress bristling with launch bays and cannon arrays, its hull bearing the insignia of the Terran Defense Command. Its name burned across its side in white letters, TDS Leviathan. Kether's heart sank. "What is that?" his strategist whispered. Kether stared in silence. He had heard rumors, whispers of a supercarrier built in secret, capable of deploying entire armies by itself. But seeing it with his own eyes turned those rumors into a nightmare. As the Leviathan's hangar bays opened, wave after wave of dropships poured forth, and more revenants with them, descending like black meteors to finish what they had started. On Halora 3's surface, the night sky lit up with burning streaks. Civilians emerged from their shelters to watch, their fear melting into awe as they saw humanity's ultimate warriors arriving in endless waves. General HFY's comms officer turned to her, eyes wide. "Ma'am, the Dominion is breaking. Their command ships are being overrun. The Leviathan has entered low orbit." Asha allowed herself a rare, small smile. "Then it's time to end this," she said. For Admiral Kether, the battle was no longer about victory. It was about survival. He watched as his fleet burned, one ship after another winking out on his tactical display. Revenant boarding parties were cutting through the last lines of defense, closing in on his bridge. "Admiral," one of his crew cried. "They're coming." The doors to the bridge blew inward, and the first revenant stepped through. Its towering frame filled the entrance, blue optics flaring. Behind it came more, their weapons raised, their armor gleaming with enemy blood. Kether rose to his full height. He would not cower. "This is not war," he snarled. "This is extermination." The lead revenant's voice was like a cold echo. "No. This is humanity's answer." And then the bridge erupted into battle. Admiral Kether had fought through countless campaigns. He had stood on the ruins of conquered capitals and watched enemies beg for mercy before the Dominion crushed them. But as the revenant loomed before him on the bridge of his flagship, he realized something he had never felt before. This was how those conquered enemies must have felt. The bridge shook as plasma bolts ricocheted off the Revenant's armor. Kether's guards rushed forward, and died in seconds. The warriors moved like a storm, cutting down every defender with brutal efficiency. Kether reached for his sidearm, but the lead Revenant seized him by the throat and lifted him effortlessly into the air. "You brought this war to humanity," the Revenant's voice rumbled through its helm. "Now you will carry its memory back to the Dominion." Kether's mind reeled. You are not men. You are monsters." The Revenant's optics glowed brighter. "We are what humanity becomes when you force it to survive." Then, with a single strike, the Revenant hurled him across the deck. Kether crashed against the command dais. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the Dominion fleet breaking apart in the void outside the viewport, burning, retreating, dying. The fall of the Dominion fleet. For hours, the slaughter continued. Dominion destroyers tried to form a defensive cordon, but the Leviathan's guns tore them apart with precision salvos. Boarding actions swept through the remaining cruisers, leaving nothing but gutted wrecks. And everywhere the Revenants fought, victory followed. Their presence broke the enemy's will. Once proud Dominion Marines abandoned their posts, fleeing down corridors that ran red with blood. Some surrendered, only to find themselves face to face with the silent giants who accepted their surrender with a nod, and then moved on to the next fight without a word. By the time the sun of Halora, 3 rose over its scarred plains, the battle was no longer a battle. It was a rout. A message to the galaxy. When the fighting was over, the Leviathan broadcast a message across every major hypernet channel. General Asha Virek appeared on the feed, her uniform scorched and her face shadowed by exhaustion. Yet her voice was calm, almost cold. To the Dominion and to every power who thought humanity would kneel, she said, "Look upon Halora, 3. Look upon what your war has awakened." The feed shifted to show the wreckage of the Dominion fleet, still burning in orbit. Then came the image of the Revenants, standing in formation on the planet's surface, silent and immovable like statues of death. "This is not a threat," Asha continued. "This is a promise. Humanity will not be conquered. We will not be erased. And if you come for us again." She let the words hang, then gestured toward the black-armored giants. "You will meet them." The feed cut to black. The galaxy reacts. The message spread like wildfire. Across distant sectors, council chambers erupted in chaos. Admirals demanded emergency meetings. Merchant guilds diverted entire trade fleets away from Terran space. Worlds that had once considered joining the war against Earth now rushed to declare neutrality, some even offering alliances, desperate not to be next. The Dominion itself fell into turmoil. Its war council fractured as news of Admiral Kether's defeat spread. For centuries, the Dominion had been a symbol of unstoppable power. Now, for the first time, it bled, and its rivals scented opportunity. But the galaxy's fear was not just for the Dominion. It was for humanity. Because now everyone knew what humanity kept in its vaults. The Revenants march. On Halora, 3, the survivors emerged from bunkers. They lined the roads and plains, cheering as the Revenants marched past in silence. Children watched wide-eyed as the towering warriors passed by. One of them, a small girl, broke free of the crowd and ran forward. She reached up and touched the black armor of the nearest Revenant. The warrior paused. For a long moment, the battlefield was silent. Then, slowly, the Revenant knelt and offered her a single gauntlet hand. General Asha watched from her command vehicle. For the first time since the war began, she felt something loosen in her chest. They were never just weapons, she murmured. They were protectors. Epilogue, the quiet before the next storm. Weeks later, the Leviathan returned to orbit over Earth. The Revenants disembarked in silence, disappearing back into the vaults beneath the planet's surface. No one knew when they would be called again. Perhaps years would pass. Perhaps decades. But the galaxy would never forget the day it saw them. From the slums of the Outer Rim to the thrones of ancient empires, the same whispers spread. The galaxy already feared humans. But now they fear what walks beside them. And somewhere, deep beneath Earth's crust, the revenants waited, silent, patient, eternal. Waiting for the day they would be needed again.